Hello, Mahtomedi students and families. I'm Justin Hahn, principal at Mahtomedi High School. I hope that you are finding some time to rest and relax and spend quality time with your families this summer. One of those traditions of summer is thinking about and anticipating coming back to school. And I know that this year, more than any, has given a lot of concern and worry to both students, staff, or to all students, staff, and families. And so tonight, and the reason for the video is to provide some information around what that planning looks like for our upcoming school year. So with that, I'll jump right in. So today's purpose is to provide an overview of the 3 different learning models that we've been presented and how they will look at the high school. The second piece with the purpose of tonight is to give you some idea about those safety and health measures, our top priority for students and staff, and then also answer some of the most frequently asked questions that came up in our parent surveys. So as we've gone throughout the planning process this summer, there are 3 major components that we've taken into consideration when making plans around the 3 different learning models. So those 3 different models provided the framework for us, first and foremost. So the in-person, the hybrid, and the distance learning, which I'll talk more about later in this presentation, provided us that framework about what we needed to plan for and around. Secondly, the state of Minnesota, both with the Department of Education and Department of Health, have been giving us continuing guidance, and I'm sure we'll be providing, as the situation is very fluid, we'll be providing continued guidance because we have over a month until school starts. And then last week, we received more guidance in the form of the Safe Learning Plan from Governor Walz and about which different learning plans we can potentially come back to school in. And then the last part of this planning process, or the information that helped us with the planning process, has been the feedback, the invaluable feedback from both staff and families. So again, this is an overview of the 3 different learning models, and over the next few weeks, we'll continue to provide additional information and expectations as they are developed. So one of the major components that we need to consider as we move forward with this learning model, selecting either the in-person, the hybrid, or distance learning 2.0 to start, is going to be based on our county COVID-19 metrics. And so based on those metrics, every 2 weeks, we can shift between the different models based on what is happening with confirmed cases of COVID-19. So we built plans so that we can transition between models and provide continuous learning for our students. Families may request a distance learning plan if they do not wish to participate in in-person learning. Students who need to quarantine may use distance learning during their exclusion period. So the next few slides deal with one of our, like I said, our top priority, which is the health and safety of our students and staff. All students and staff are going to be expected to wear masks, and that will be the requirement for any in-person learning. So that means if they're in scenario 1 with the in-person, or scenario 2 when they're in person for the hybrid learning, they'll be required to wear a mask or a face covering. And also, all students riding school transportation will be required to wear a mask or face covering. The cleaning protocols are being established and set up by the Minnesota Department of Health, and we are following all of those guidelines. For families and for staff and students as well, COVID-19 symptoms and screening. So more information will follow throughout the course of the summer and leading up to the school year. But families will be conducting daily health checks for their students at home for COVID-19. Staff will be doing the same thing for themselves concerning COVID-19. And then students will be observed throughout the school day for symptoms of COVID-19. There's exclusion and notification practices in case somebody does come down or has symptoms of COVID-19. We'll follow MDH guidance with those exclusion and notification practices. Sorry, my light just went off. Haven't moved in a while. Our health offices will have new configurations, and each building will have a designated isolation space. And that isolation space is for a student or students who would be exhibiting symptoms of COVID-19 and awaiting a ride or a pickup from a parent. So health and safety and other noteworthy practices in our school buildings, and other things to consider around materials and supplies. So we just talked about the nurses station, and that's going to be reconfigured and look differently. The isolation space will be within that space. And also in our classrooms, our desks will be spread out to practice social distancing or physical distancing. And there's a picture that I'll share with you later in the presentation that illustrates that. We're going to be increasing the use of our outdoor learning space, weather permitting. I've had some staff members that have already talked with me about how they plan to utilize that space. And I've seen good examples over the past year in how different teachers have utilized that space. Use of social distancing stickers and traffic flow arrows. That goes along with the next one, which is that signage being displayed in our buildings. And so we're really going to have, and we have stuff up in the building right now, but not everything that we're going to need going forward for if students were to return in the hybrid or in-person models. And so we have a traffic flow pattern for students and staff to follow, and we'll be communicating that more as we lead up to the school year. Plexiglass for offices, and then increased hand washing and sanitation stations. Staying with cohorts, if in the hybrid model, for example, that would be that blue and gold cohort, so splitting 50% of our, getting 50% of our student population in the building during the day. No large gatherings. We would not be able to have pep fests or any large lyceums. Limit of building visitors, and then utilization of new entrances and exits and protocols for when students come to school, if we come back to that model. Materials and supplies, individual supplies for students. An example of that would be the technology devices that have been provided to all students and staff by the district. And the rollout will begin in the next couple of weeks with that. Backpacks for materials. We're not allowing students to utilize their lockers at the high school. And then new school supply lists will be released based on new learning models. And so once we find out exactly what we get to come back to school in, because again, tonight is about the overview of the 3 different learning models, we will have more information for those school supply lists. The transportation and nutrition around health and safety. So under the hybrid model, buses will operate at 50% capacity. They're going to be cleaned before and after each route. If we're back to in-person, that learning model, students can ride the bus as before, but again, they'll be cleaned before and after each route, regardless of what learning model we come back to. All drivers and students will be expected to wear masks or face coverings while on school transportation. And then new practices for pickup and drop-off, walkers and bikers will be established to accommodate potential increases in self-transportation. For the nutritional side of things, prepackaged bag breakfasts and lunches will be available through nutrition services. We're still working on the plans for what that will look like. Students will remain at social distancing spacing during lunches, and we've increased, if we come back to depending on the model, we have some different ideas in place for that, which will be explained in the hybrid model. And then staff will be expected to wear masks and face coverings, and when students are distance learning, they may take home prepackaged meals. Our commitment to you as the community is, regardless of our learning model, at Mahtomedi Public Schools, we're going to provide educational excellence through 5 days a week of continuous learning, consistent course and content expectations. And we found out and we learned a lot in the spring about distance learning, and providing that consistency in usage and especially around technology is going to help us going forward. Relationships with educators that foster academic and social emotional growth, engagement, and feedback. And this is the foundation of what we believe here in Mahtomedi, is that before any true learning can happen, those relationships and rapport and trust need to be built before we can begin that learning process. And that's really what the first couple of weeks of school is meant to build, that foundation so that the learning can happen. Structure that supports staff, students, and families to minimize new transitions, and then opportunities for academic reflection, exploration, and agency in their learning. And what distance learning will look is a structured, continuous learning every day, online daily instruction with teachers based on a regular schedule. So that's providing that structure, which is different than what we had in the spring at the high school. Face-to-face and recorded lessons to provide flexibility, online small group instruction, and also independent practice and feedback, which are critical in that learning process. This is a visual of what a classroom would look like at the high school being physically distanced. And so there are 16 desks in this classroom, and gives you an idea of what a typical room would look like. On to our different learning models. The first one that we're going to go through is the in-person model. And so what that looks like for here at the high school is a 9 to 2:30 start, or 9 a.m. start to 2:30 ending time. And that 5 days a week of continuous learning, students would actually be following their regular schedule of 6-period days. And so all secondary students would attend in person Monday through Friday. And some of the health and safety considerations that we'd have to follow: so staggered entry, exit passing times, no large gatherings, the usage of masks. We'd also encourage social distancing. There would be different hygiene practices in place, and also enhanced safety and cleaning guidelines. All right, with the hybrid model, and this one I have a visual for you to see so that I can help explain it a little bit. But that same time frame from 9 a.m. to 2:30, 5 days a week of continuous learning. All secondary students are in person for 2 days, and then would be distance learning from home for 3 days a week. And so I'll talk about that as I show you the visual, but the school and classroom capacity. So due to capacity limits, 4 days a week, we'll have 50% of our students in the building each day. And then on those same days when we have that in-person group, 50% of our students will be engaged in distance learning engaged in that distance learning format. And on the 5th day, all students will engage in structured face-to-face instruction in a distance learning format. Staff will be using Google Classroom as they did in the springtime. And as I said before, there's a lot of learning that's happened and occurred from the springtime. And so we plan to implement those lessons with the model, whatever model we come back to. This is an example, as I said, of a visual of what our 3-period block schedule would look like in the hybrid learning model. And so students, if you look over here, students in 1 week would be attending half their classes, so periods 1, 3, and 5 in a block schedule. So 90 minutes of learning in a block schedule for their periods 1, 3, and 5. And so essentially, during that week, they would be in those courses. And so the blue cohort would be in person, as an example, on Monday and Wednesday, while the yellow cohort was learning from home in a distance learning format. And then on Tuesday and Thursday, that yellow cohort or group of students would be in person, attending hours 1, 3, and 5, while the blue cohort is at home in a distance learning format. And then on the Fridays, all students would be learning in a distance learning format in hours 1, 3, and 5. The following week, in week 2, we would rotate to hours 2, 4, and 6. And the idea behind this is that students would be able to get 2 weeks of learning in 1 week, while only focusing and being able to go in much more depth and rigor with the classroom content and material. And the focus would only be on those 3 courses instead of all 6. In a distance learning 2.0 model, and we're calling it 2.0 because we know that we can do better and that it will look different than what took place in the springtime. And so that time, again, is very similar or the same as what you've seen before in the other 2 models, 9 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. And then the weekly schedule is 5 days of continuous learning, and all students would participate in a structured, scheduled distance learning format Monday through Friday. And the platform, again, that students would be using is Google Classroom. The distance learning format will be continuous learning every day, online daily instruction with teachers based on a regular schedule, face-to-face and recorded lessons to provide flexibility, small group instruction with the ability to do breakout sessions. So again, part of that is that peer-to-peer feedback, or that whole feedback loop from peer-to-peer, from teacher to student, and from student to teacher as well. And then the ability to do independent practice, and again, have that feedback. And I think that's a major component. And as we have different technology pieces in place, this will really help to facilitate, especially our one-to-one initiative, where all students and staff will be given a Chromebook at the high school level. That feedback will become very important. All right, regardless of the model, in-person, hybrid, or distance learning, the instructional expectations that we have are going to be consistent across our K-12 continuum. And so teachers have been asked to identify priority or power standards, and those will be the focus throughout the course of our year. Instruction by their teacher using modeling and feedback. And we talked about the feedback process is so important for learning and to continue to improve as a major component of the learning process. Opportunities to practice with feedback from the teacher. And again, peer-to-peer feedback at this level is also a very important component of that learning process. Ongoing assessment to monitor growth. Small group instruction to differentiate instruction and meet individual needs. And then Google Classroom is the platform, and we've talked about that multiple times. All right, the last segment is about the frequently asked questions. And so I'm going to try and go through these a little bit quickly. As I think I'm running out of time here. I wanted to keep it around 20 minutes. So how will students be screened? So families and staff will be educated on COVID-19 symptoms and instructed to self-screen or screen their student daily prior to coming to school. What COVID-19 situation will require our class, school, or district to close? So when we receive notification about anyone testing positive for COVID-19 in any of our schools, we'll work with the Minnesota Department of Health on that notification process, and then they'll help us recommend a course of action to move forward. All right, a lot on masks and face coverings. So will staff and students be required to wear masks? Yes. They're going to be expected to wear face masks or face coverings in buildings and during in-person learning and while in school transportation. For more information, the Department of Health webpage has a link, and you'll get this PowerPoint sent to you as well. How will you encourage students to wear masks? We're going to teach and reinforce use of face coverings throughout the course of the school day. Families can start to practice this use before the start of the school year, and also lanyards are helpful for students to keep their masks on. And then what types of masks and face coverings will be allowed? There's a link by the Department of Health for school-specific face covering requirements, and they're outlined there. All right, so why is the adjustment of school start and end times necessary for the 2020-21 school year? The school start and end time change is important because it eliminates extensive cleaning from our morning childcare program that would impact instruction and regular start time at our elementary schools. And so we know through the parent survey that 60% of our Wildwood families intended to return to in-person work. And we wanted to have that practice of allowing them to drop off students and then be able to start school. And so when we can reduce and eliminate that childcare in the morning, again, it allows us to get school started and allows us to get it started in a timely fashion. So we've made the start of school and end times across the hybrid and in-person models to allow for better transition if we switch within those models. Another question that we get asked very frequently, my children are at different schools. Is it possible to align their distance learning days? We'll be sending out an enrollment form and asking families if they prefer their children to have their distance learning days aligned. We will do our best to honor these requests. We're unable to honor friend requests, but we will communicate your distance learning days as soon as possible. Activities. Will after-school activities and athletics take place during the 2020-21 school year? The State High School League is planning for fall athletics to begin on August 17th, but will announce any adjustments to their schedule. Registration for our high school activities is currently scheduled to open on August 5th. Community Education is planning to provide middle school enrichment and athletic offerings, and also youth enrichment offerings, both starting in September, and you can see their website for more information. Frequently asked question, next one here. Will families be able to switch between in-person, hybrid, and distance learning? Yes, if families feel uncomfortable with in-person learning under the in-person or hybrid model, families can request a distance learning plan. We will communicate with families in the future about the time periods when they may request a switch in their model. And then students who need to quarantine may use distance learning during their exclusion period. What will the process be for devices for all learners during the 2020-21 school year? So secondary students will use their devices throughout the day, whether in hybrid and distance learning. Secondary students will be allowed to take them back and forth between home and school daily. Having a common device at home and in school allows teachers to know the tools to which all students have access so they can be creative, so they can create effective and dynamic learning opportunities. More information will be shared with families closer to the start of the school year. All right, and then the last slide that we have is additional resources. And again, this will be sent to you, and so feel free to reach out with any other concerns or questions that you might have. We appreciate your ongoing and continued support in the face of what's happening right now in this pandemic, and know that we're going to make the best decisions for our students and our community. Thanks so much, and take care.